Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we often get listener requests that are just loaded with curiosity, but then every once in a while, we get one that's basically a philosophical gauntlet being thrown down.
And that is absolutely what we have today.
Right.
Yeah. Our listener put together what they called a stack of constructive doubt. It's this massive list, maybe 50 overlapping critiques, all questioning the structure, the purpose, the logic of Salah or Islamic prayer.
And these are not simple questions. We're talking theological, legal, social challenges.
For sure. So that's why we pulled together a huge range of sources. We've got Fiqh, the legal schools. We've got deep theological arguments, Sufi mystical insights, and even some modern sociological takes on the practice.
So our mission today, as always, is to just systematically unpack how the tradition itself responds. We want to represent every perspective and do it impartially.
We're really going to get into the nuance here.
Yeah.
This isn't about just confirming the basics. It's about diving into this rich intellectual tradition that's been grappling with these very critiques for centuries.
Okay, let's jump right in then. The most fundamental challenge, the one that really kicks off almost all of these questions, is this. If God is all-knowing, everywhere, completely transcendent, why the fixed schedule? Why the rigid structure and all the repetitive ritual? If God already knows my heart, why the performance?
That is the perfect place to start because the classical scholars, they saw this question coming a mile away. They start by clarifying what worship is not.
Okay.
And across all the major schools, Sunni, Shia, Sufi, the consensus is absolute. Allah is Al-Ghani, the self-sufficient. The deity doesn't need validation. It's not increased by our worship.
So that whole modern critique, that this is all about bolstering a divine fragile ego, the sources actually rejected that idea centuries ago.
Completely. I mean, they frame the command to pray as a kind of prescription for human transformation, for our spiritual nourishment.
Like a doctor prescribing medicine.
Exactly. The medicine benefits the patient, not the doctor. So the rigidity of Salah is for our discipline, to regulate the chaotic human spirit, not for the Creator's satisfaction. It's an act of deep self-care disguised as obedience.
I really like that framing. It flips the whole idea of need back onto the human side. But, okay, if that's the case, let's talk about the structure itself.
Let's.
Why 5 times a day, specifically? Why does it have to interrupt our lives so often? This gets right to that feeling that prayer can be a huge waste of time or maybe just a tool for compliance.
Well, the classical view sees those fixed times dawn, noon, mid-afternoon, sunset, and night as providing an essential structure, an anchor.
A framework.
A framework, yeah. If prayer was, say, once a week, it would just become an external holiday, but 5 times a day. That ensures the heart is constantly being pulled back from the material world, the dunya, at these critical points in the day.
It's an enforced mental reset.
It is. And the Sufi response is maybe even more visceral. They call this repetition breathing for the soul. They ask the question right back at you. They say, you eat 3 times a day because your body needs constant nourishment.
Right.
So why would your soul need anything less? It needs to breathe God consciousness all day long.
Okay, but let's hit that modern friction point. Productivity. If I'm in a corporate job, trying to stay in a flow state, interrupting my work 5 times a day, even for just 5 or 10 minutes, that's going to tank my efficiency.
Right, the data-driven argument.
Yeah.
This is where modern scholars really flip the script. They basically argue that if your modern economic model can't handle 25 to 30 minutes of spaced-out reflection in a 24-hour period,
then maybe the model is the problem.
Exactly. Maybe the model is the problem, not the prayer. They suggest that this idea of constant uninterrupted output is treating us like machines, not like humans who need, reflection and spiritual stability.
That's a really powerful reframing. It challenges what productive time even means.
And the classical sources totally back this up with the idea of baraka blessing, or spiritual increase. They argue that the time you spend in prayer, especially right after the dawn prayer, Fajr, isn't wasted time. It's time invested.
And that investment pays off later?
That's the idea. It translates into more clarity, more focus, more real productivity. And of course, we can't forget the flexibility. There are concessions, Ruksa, for travelers, for people who are sick, shift workers. The law adapts. It's a discipline, not a cage.
Okay, so that covers the why, the philosophy of the schedule. Let's get into the mechanics, the physical side of it.
The physical paradox, yeah.
Right. If worship is all internal, why the mandatory bowing, standing, prostrating, and the big one, why bow to a cube?
This brings up the fear of shirk right away, of idolatry. If
Yeah.
God is everywhere, why are we all facing the Kaaba? And the answer is that it's a unifying symbol. the Qibla.
So God isn't in the Kaaba.
No, not at all. It's just a point of orientation. It prevents the chaos of a billion people all praying in 1,000 different directions. It's a logistical and theological unifier.
It's like a celestial compass bearing, not the destination itself.
Perfect way to put it. And the sources have this incredible historical anecdote to really hammer this home. They cite Caliph Umar, one of the most respected figures after the Prophet.
What did he do?
He stood before the black stone, which is part of the Kaaba, and said out loud, "I know you are just a stone that can neither benefit nor harm, but I saw the Prophet kiss you, and so I kiss you."
Wow, so he's explicitly saying his reverence is for the command, the Prophet's example, not the object.
It's obedience to the protocol, plain and simple. So if the directions is a symbol, then what about the choreography? The bowing, the prostration, what's that about?
Yeah, the critique there is that these just look like pagan-style submission, purely physical.
The traditional view here is that worship has to be holistic. Body, mind, spirit, all working together. The body testifies to what the spirit is feeling. Prostration, the sujood, is the ultimate physical act of humility. I mean, think about it. You're placing your head, the seat of your ego, your intellect, physically on the ground. You can't be arrogant in that position. It's designed to be the annihilation of the ego.
But that immediately brings up an accessibility issue. If those movements are so key, what about someone who physically can't do them?
And this is where the law shows its mercy. The principle is simple. Obligation follows capacity.
So it adapts.
Completely. If you can't stand, you pray sitting. Can't sit, you pray lying down. Can't move, you use eye gesture. Or even just pure intention in your heart. The form adapts, proving that the inner orientation, the submission of the will, is the real essence of it all.
That's a great transition to our next cluster of critiques, which really pits the legal rules against the spiritual heart. Why is there so much emphasis on technical correctness? Why can something like, passing gas invalidate the whole prayer?
The legal schools, the fiqh, they treat Salah as a formal legal act, a transaction with God in a way. So the rules are there to preserve the integrity of the form that was commanded. The sources use this analogy of a shell protecting a kernel. If you discard the shell, the kernel, the content, gets compromised.
Let's get technical for a second. The ritual purity, or tahara. Why does something so involuntary break it? It feels like it's focused on, legal trivialities.
It's not about punishment, it's about preparation. Losing wudu, or ritual purification, that's what jurists call hadath, it's a state of ritual impurity. Think of tahara as hitting a spiritual reset button.
Getting you focused.
Exactly. It puts you in a state of readiness for this formal interaction. An involuntary act just signals that that state of readiness has been, technically broken. It just requires a quick renewal before you re-enter the formal act.
So God isn't judging the accident, the rules are just preserving that state of mindful readiness.
Precisely. And the legal tradition isn't some kind of trap. There are safety valves. If you make an honest mistake, you forget a prostration or lose count, you don't have to start over.
What do you do?
You perform what's called the sujud al-asa, the prostration of forgetfulness. At the end, it essentially patches the prayer and saves its legal validity. The system is designed to account for human error.
Okay, let's pivot to language. The requirement to use Arabic. For most Muslims in the world, it's not their first language. Doesn't that just lead to mindless recitation, to cultural hegemony even?
This is a huge ongoing tension, and every school of thought has an answer. The traditional defense has two main points. First, Arabic preserves the exact original wording of the Quran. A translation is always an interpretation.
And the second point?
It's a universal liturgical language. It unifies the global community. A Muslim from Chicago can stand next to one from Kuala Lumpur, and they were saying the exact same words. There's a powerful unity in that.
But if I'm just repeating sounds I don't get, am I really communicating? Or is it just a barrier?
That is the core spiritual question, and all the scholars agree on this. Understanding the meaning is mandatory as a spiritual goal. Mindless recitation is always seen as a deficiency, even if the prayer is, legally valid.
Yeah. So there's a distinction between legal validity and spiritual quality.
A huge one. And remember, the Arabic requirement is only for the fixed, mandatory parts. The personal prayer, the dua you make after, that can be in any language you want. English, Spanish, whatever is closest to your heart.
Okay, we've covered the form, the philosophy, the legal framework. Let's move to probably the most sensitive issues. Inclusivity, social justice, we have to talk about gender. Why the segregation in the mosque? Does women praying behind men imply they're inferior?
The sources absolutely acknowledge how sensitive this is, and it's debated internally. The traditional view frames it as a functional arrangement
Functional how?
to protect modesty and focus during the physical movements of prayer, the bowing and prostration. There's a famous saying of the prophet that the best rows for women are the last rows. It's framed as organizational, not a statement on spiritual rank.
But we know that critics, including many modern Muslim women scholars, they argue that in practice it does reinforce inferiority, that it leads to women being put in cramped, worse spaces.
And that is the crucial internal tension. While the majority legal tradition prohibits women leading mixed prayers based on established precedents, the critics argue this has become more cultural than functional, that it's a form of institutionalized patriarchy. We have to report that both of those views, the functional argument and the cultural critique, are very active forces within Islam today.
What about the restriction on menstruating women praying? Is that about impurity, or is there another way to see it?
Yeah, the consensus among jurists is that it's a ritual exemption. It's based on the technical purity rules, the hadith we talked about. It's not a moral defect or a stigma.
And the proof for that?
The key piece of evidence they cite is that women have to make up missed fasts from Ramadan, but they're explicitly told not to make up missed prayers.
So they get a total waiver from that obligation.
Exactly. It's seen as an act of divine easing, of mercy. It removes what would be a massive burden of having to perform hundreds of missed prayers later. It's a concession.
Let's shift to another difficult topic. Punishment. Some classical texts describe missing a prayer as a crime worse than murder. That sounds incredibly severe. Where's the compassion in that?
That classical severity is targeting a very specific thing. The persistent, arrogant abandonment of prayer. Deliberate neglect.
Not just someone who struggles.
No. It's seen as a major sin because it's like you're severing the fundamental connection with the Creator. It's a crime against the Creator. The harsh language is a deterrent against outright rejection.
But what about the person who honestly has a hard time? Stress, work, depression.
And scholars always insist that this severity has to be balanced with God's vast mercy and the power of sincere repentance or tawbah. Modern scholars really stress this balance of fear, khawf, and hope, Raja. God alone knows the true intention of this struggling believer.
Last one in this area, adapting to extremes. Polar regions with a 6-month day, or astronauts in space. Doesn't that just show the rules are arbitrary if the sun isn't setting?
That's a fantastic question, and it actually shows how sophisticated the legal tradition is. The principle of prayer is universal, but the mechanism, the sun's position, is local. When that local mechanism breaks.
The principle of interpretation kicks in.
Exactly. Ijtihad, reasoned interpretation. Jurists rule that you have to adapt. You can use the prayer times of the nearest normal city, or use Mecca's times, or just divide the 24-hour day into 5 parts. It proves the rule is flexible enough for situations that were literally unknowable at the time. Flexibility is a feature, not a flaw.
Okay, so that brings us to a final synthesis. We've wrestled with all of this: divine need, physical demands, legal rules, social conflicts. The core tension seems to be the struggle between a fixed universal form and the individual's need for a personal, adaptable spiritual experience.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it brings us to what might be the most powerful internal critique of all: the link between the ritual and actual morality.
What do you mean?
The Quran itself warns about people who perform the ritual flawlessly, but their prayers are still heedless or unjust or just for show.
So if prayer is supposed to change me, but I get up off the mat and I'm still unkind or unethical, was the prayer even worth anything?
Classical scholars would say that if the prayer doesn't lead to better behavior, then it's deficient in spirit, even if it was legally valid. The form is just the container. Sincerity, transformation, good character, that's the content. One source says, prayer isn't a spiritual laundry machine to just wash away guilt. It has to be a vehicle for ethical growth.
So this whole tension between the outer ritual and the inner ethics, it's not a critique of the tradition, it's a central question within the tradition.
Exactly. The real struggle, according to all these sources, isn't just about performing the ritual perfectly. It's about making sure the time you spend on that mat translates into compassion and justice when you stand up and deal with the world. The ultimate question the tradition asks isn't, was your prostration perfect, but did your prayer transform you?